don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. I learned this the hard way with my first company. So I created NetSuite, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSuite gives you the visibility and control you need to make smart decisions and grow with confidence. That's why companies who use NetSuite grow 3 times faster than the S&P 500.
Schedule your free product tour right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Leaders Show, where we talk key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. Today, we're discussing the end of broadcast TV, plus headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. We're live every Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the audio recording is available the following week wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to our sponsor, Oracle NetSuite. Their cloud ERP provides real-time visibility into operational and financial performance. IRPA AI members and followers get preferred pricing of 45% off at irpaai.com/netsuite. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up IRPA AI and the Digital Enterprise Institute, a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members globally, all around enterprise AI, automation, and digital transformation. I'm joined today by Chris Surdak, Senior Analyst for IRPA AI, formerly White House Chief Transformation Office Advisor, Partner for Digital Transformation at Gartner, and Automation AI Practice Lead at EY. He's also the award-winning author of 3 books, The Care and Feeding of Bots, Data Crush, and Jerk 12 Steps to Rule the World. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well. Getting ready for a little actual precipitation out here in California.
Yeah, we keep getting snow in New York, and you guys complain about a little precipitation. But you know what? It's good. It's good, right? Fire
Yeah.
on over there. Yeah.
Anything to help the fires stay away at this point. So.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, couple headlines I think we'd start with before we get to our main topic today. I feel like we almost always spend all of our time, or 90% of our time, talking about AI stuff. It's always top of the news, it seems like. But hey, I've got some other headlines for you today. Okay, it's still kind of AI related, but it's Elon news. There's a bunch of Elon news. The first is a bunch of investors led by Musk submitted a $97 billion offer to control Open AI, according to the Wall Street Journal. Musk said it's time for OpenAI to return to the open source, safety-focused force for good it once was.
And this is sort of like that 5-dimensional chess, potentially, or not. It's hard to say. They're trying to make the argument. I think in the last funding round, OpenAI pulled in, they were valued at like $300 billion. So is this Musk trying to like make fun of that and come in at 1/3 the price? Does he know something that the rest of us don't know, and he knows the valuation is actually substantially lower, which is kind of what happened with Twitter? And also, is he concerned that he was sort of shut out of Stargate, right? Because he wasn't involved in the Stargate deal.
Yeah, he was quick to criticize that deal. Yeah,
and quick to criticize. So, $500 billion in more data centers. I'd be investing in coal-fired power plants myself right now, because how the heck are you going to feed those things? But so I think there's a real 5-dimensional chess thing going on. And if I was going to play real conspiracy theorist, excuse me, you wonder why don't we have a ChatGPT 5 yet? And what other innovations or technology has there been breakthroughs in? I know several more of the OpenAI's AI safety people left the company voluntarily, and aren't talking a lot about why they did so. But NDAs can be pretty ironclad there. So if anything, let's just expect there's going to be more drama around it. And I think Sam Altman's rebuff was kind of funny. I'll offer you $8 billion for X in return. So who knows?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I thought that was kind of funny, but and you wonder too, with the OpenAI, were they really voluntary, or were they kind of forced voluntary, like the federal government push right now, which is the other half of the Elon Musk story. So he was at the White House yesterday, essentially to defend some of the cuts he's making in his government role. Department of Government Efficiency, admitting that there's been some mistakes and there'll be more, but that they're doing good work. And the President Trump signs another executive order to expand kind of his role and the downsizing of the federal workforce in the U.S.
Again, it's really interesting to see. Like they say, sunshine is the best disinfectant. And so if he's just uncovering waste that's out there, I don't think the argument isn't that some U.S. aid isn't a good thing or some of the funds that they push, but there are, I mean, even in our own, when we've been in companies, you see all kinds of potential waste and so forth. But when you see numbers in the order of hundreds of billions of dollars, and I think they're approaching up to $1 trillion of savings a year, when we have, I think it's a $2 trillion a year budget deficit, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, eventually it adds up to something substantial. So you would have to expect that someone's not going to like the fact that that's being exposed. But to his credit, I mean, he said he's going to be transparent, and people are yelling at him for the transparency. So that kind of speaks for itself, I guess. Regardless of how all this comes about, I think that one thing that people are going to look back on 50 years ago, that is Musk buying X is probably one of the most socially impactful events to ever occur since perhaps Pearl Harbor or something like that. I mean, our kids are going to be reading about that one event in history.
Yeah. It's an interesting, but it's probably worth doing an entire show on the evolution of Musk. I was at lunch this week with somebody, a mutual friend of both of ours, actually. And, he said to me, he goes, when did Musk become so controversial? I remember when he was like a Steve Jobs figure that everybody kind of aspired to, at least, in the business world, the tech world. You can make a couple different arguments, but I think it was largely when he did the Twitter acquisition and then just kind of cleaned house. And I think people, equate this to that, even if there's some validity in it and some good in it. I think people just kind of see it like that.
Well, he was an absolute darling of mass media. We're going to talk about broadcast TV. Everyone loved him. He was an American hero. He's a South Africa, or he's an African American, quite literally, as he emigrated from South Africa. The point at which he switched is as soon as he kind of switched from being a moderate Democrat. Well, there's a few other people that we know that are like that too. Donald Trump, Tulsi Gabbard. So there's the political polarity in the country is pretty extreme. And, even going back to the American Revolution, only 3% of the total population of the colonies fought on either side of that war. Yeah. And the other 94% were dragged along through the war. So, extremists make history, whether you like it or not. And it's a big deal for someone that's far on one side to kind of jump to the other side.
So the government's not the only one doing layoffs. Round of layoffs affecting about 3,600 workers is underway at Meta. Some of the affected employees receiving early Monday emails citing anonymous sources. Meta had said in January that the redundancy would affect about 5% of its workforce and target low performers. And the claim is that they're going to replace laid off employees with machine learning engineers. So this is one of those things we've been talking about the real near-term effects of some of the Gen AI stuff.
Yeah, and there's a lot of traffic out there about how, again, it's sort of inevitable. Some proportion of people are going to be dislocated by any new technology. And you figure a company as technology focused as Meta is going to be pretty good at figuring out what that percentage should be. I've certainly been saying in all of my books, and well over a decade, the technology is going to automate very low end, sort of commoditized labor, and then it's going to facilitate your high end, very capable labor, who is going to become much more expensive. Because if I'm multiplying human capabilities by a factor of 1,000, and it's a really important position, I need to have the best sort of people. I know one of the folks that's pretty hardcore in AI that I follow a lot on LinkedIn was talking the other day about some of the best AI people that he knows. I mean, real AI experts are pulling down 10 million plus salaries plus another 10 million plus in bonuses. One of his colleagues just pulled $20 million in a year of work. So I look back to the article I wrote about 11 years ago, Better Be a Baller, where the people that really understand this technology are going to be like professional sports players. Here we are, it's happening. And then at the low end, a lot of folks that, through no fault of their own, that might be doing work very effectively. There's just automation does it more cheaply.
Yeah. Some of this AI regulation stuff is kind of coming to a head. Last week, we talked about the U.S. Patent Office coming out with some guidance around what's actually patentable. This week, the first major AI copyright case in the U.S. Wrapped up, and a judge ruled in favor of Thomson Reuters. This is a suit that started in 2020 against a now defunct AI startup called Ross Intelligence, who claimed that the fair use doctrine permitted it to scrape material from their legal research a database. This judge says, no, it doesn't. So this is the beginning of some precedent setting. I'm sure it'll be appealed. And, you spend some time in the legal field, you know how these things play out, but it's the first kind of, stake in the ground as far as what the precedent's going to be on this.
It's going to be appealed and reappealed. It's going to be peeled more than an apple. And at some point, it's going to get to the Supreme Court, no doubt. I don't know what that time frame is. I'd be surprised if it's within less than 5 years. And so you're going to see lots of this coming all over the place. The thing that I was struck by, I don't know if you saw it, that yesterday, JD Vance, vice president, presented at the AI governance conference in Europe. And over 60 countries signed an AI kind of safety pact, saying we're gonna implement some regulation to try to keep rein this stuff in. And the U.S. was one of the countries that refused to sign it. And one of the reasons is it was too firm on the question of AI copyright. So here we have a U.S. judge saying, yeah, copyright applies. And we as a nation are rejecting participating in an international treaty that basically says, okay, copyright does apply. So it's very interesting, lots of up in the air. There's lots of privacy and patent attorneys that are going to make a lot of money over the next 10 years as they try to figure this out. But it's definitely one of those, stay tuned. There's more news to come.
Yeah. Last headline I have for you is Spotify, who's been in news recently for layoffs and price increases, but this kind of overhaul they've been working on seems to have begun paying off. The streaming giant reported the first ever full year profitability in its most recent earnings report, with the fourth quarter revenue up 16% from previous years. They added 11 million net premium subscribers, and active monthly users hitting 675 million. So this is kind of adjacent, similar to our main topic today around broadcast TV. But you start seeing, and by the way, there's a connection here, right? The halftime show, Kendrick Lamar's show, caused a 430% increase in Spotify streams for his album right after the Super Bowl performance. So not only is that kind of evolving, seeing some of these streaming services start getting into the black, but you're starting to see some of the connections, right?
Yeah, which is interesting. I also recently saw, I think Disney Plus lost 800,000 more subscribers or something. So it kind of gets back to
profitable now. That's part of our next segment. But yeah, the other part of that is that they're profitable for the first time.
So I think it's taken people. There was always the sense of a land grab. Have the content, get people to sign up, and someday we'll be profitable. And a few of these companies are starting to figure it out. I think it's the subscriptions maybe mitigate part of your costs. It's really the consumption side and advertising. And so back to the death of broadcast, I think the shifting away from other traditional advertising channels, that ad spend is moving. I think I've recently seen that Facebook has had a huge tank in a lot of their ad revenue. So some of the platform players may have finally gotten the equation right. And the thing that it tells me more than ever is that content is king. That's certainly true in the AI space. We've gone for scale and scope so far, and now there's a shift in thought to the quality of content or data that you're using to do training. And this may actually be very good for content creators, as you had with the example of the NFL halftime show. All of a sudden, millions and millions of dollars is coming to someone who otherwise may not have had that reach. So in many ways, I think it disintermediates the control that a lot of the platform people have had in the past, which is probably good for both consumers and the artists. We'll see.
So, the broadcast TV thing is not new. The term cord cutting has been going on for a long time. I followed it. I think I might have been one of the first ones. I remember trying to explain to somebody the idea of getting TV through a Fire Stick, an Amazon Fire Stick, instead of through your cable to family and friends, and they're like, "What the heck are you talking about?" Right? So, it's evolved a lot. And the Super Bowl this past weekend, it hit an all-time viewership record, by the way, for the second year in a row. 126 million tuned in to watch the game. But here's the asterisk, and here's where it applies to what we're talking about. 13 million of them watched via Tubi streaming, which was the first time it was live streamed like this. And if you did what I did, which was go to Fox, the Fox app, and try to stream it, they had this deal where they said, no, you can't stream it through here like you usually can. You got to go download Tubi and you got to stream it through there, which is how I watched it. So not only did it get me to download Tubi, it was the first time I watched at least the Super Bowl, a streaming. And this is happening, more and more. There was the Netflix Tyson Paul fight in November on Netflix. 65 million people tuned in to watch that on Netflix. Amazon has been working on this deal with the NFL. Thursday Night Football has been on Amazon Prime. I watched the Black Friday football game on Amazon Prime. And talk about ad revenue. I mean, it was great. So I'm supposed to be shopping for Christmas because it's Black Friday, right? And I'm watching the game, and there's all these interactive ads where you just press a button while you're watching the game, and it's adding stuff to my cart. I'm like, this is great. I get to relax, I get to watch the football game, and I get to shop. I mean, this is the perfect digitally transformed life we've all been promised.
For the first time available for 10% of the viewing audience to use a completely, we would call non-traditional platform is stunning. And you can only imagine it's going to head that way more and more. It wasn't that long ago that people got all their news from either the newspaper or radio. Who does that anymore? So I think broadcast TV, effectively not very personalized, is going the way of the dodo as well. And it's sort of a slow, painful death, but I think we're coming close to the end.
Well, and you mentioned Disney, right? So the comment, and we've covered this before, about how, what happens when these services go out, because for a long time they were, Netflix was really the only one that was kind of a success story I think we covered this maybe a year ago. Everybody else was losing money. HBO Max was losing money. They were breaking things up. Paramount was losing money. Disney is the first time where their streaming service actually carried its earnings last quarter. They have a surge in profits. The streaming business, which is Hulu, ESPN Plus, plus Disney Plus, brought in $293 million last year, compared with $138 million loss from the previous year. So that's a big shift. And they, to your point before, they actually lost subscribers, but increased the price, moved some content around, created this kind of, multi-app experience that I think they're trying to all pull together now into one app through the acquisition of some of the Hulu things that they've got going on. But this is now this is, I think, the second, if I'm not mistaken, service that's profitable now after Netflix.
And I think it's taken them several years to figure out the model, because they were really stuck in a lot of the legacy of how they operate with royalties. I've actually worked with some of the entertainment companies on dealing with their royalty issues. And you'd be amazed. You'd have to keep track of thousands of a penny that is owed to like an assistant producer of a movie from 30 years ago. And the royalties resolution and contracting process for any of these theatrical companies or whatever is astonishingly complex and astonishingly expensive to run. So I think, they were really stuck with a lot of that legacy. How do you deal with that licensing and how do you deal with the royalties while you're trying to land grab the entire universe of customers into it? So I think it's taken them a good, 5 to 10 years to figure out how to balance the cost associated with that, with also the delivery, and then also recognizing which customers are optimal to work with, right? If everybody's paying the same access fee every month, a consumer that's watching 30 hours of content is actually much more expensive than someone that's watching it 2 hours a month, because of all the royalties they got to pay out. So I think they're getting probably much better at optimizing what makes a good customer, and then what's the appropriate method for paying out the royalties and so forth going forward. So, it's good to see them become more efficient with it. And hopefully that means that more of them will survive. So we have more options out there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think part of it is that they've kind of figured out, like you say, the delivery and the marketing and the pricing and some of those business model issues. But the other part, and maybe it's kind of connected to that. The other part is that I don't know if it's that their power has increased or an influence has increased, or that the traditional broadcast company's power has decreased. But you're seeing that, right? I mean, Trump has, made comments about pulling broadcaster licenses, debatable and arguable because of why he wants to pull them. But, he's talked about this. All of a sudden, these aren't the authorities that they used to be. But also, you talk about royalties, right? There's been a lot of, royalty and carrier issues where the traditional guys aren't winning. So, for me, when I first started doing the cord cutting thing, or wanted to do the cord cutting thing, it was tricky for me because I live in a market with a regional sports network. I live in New York. And there's a regional sports network in New York, which was owned by the cable company. And so there was only at one point there was none, and at one point there was one streaming service that had the rights to that. So if you're in New York and you want to watch the Islanders, the Rangers, the Knicks, I think it was the Nets, at one point it was the Mets, you needed this network. And so it made it very difficult for people to cut the cord. Well, you fast forward to today, and I say this because I think it may be the nail in the coffin for broadcast TV. Since that's happened, the cable company got acquired by a bigger company. They split off the network. And guess what? Now, all of the people in the New York tri-state area who have the local cable service that provided that network don't have that network anymore because of a contract dispute. And so now all the people, local people that have this service are like, this was the only reason I was paying what I was paying to keep broadcast TV. Why am I going to stick around? I'm going to go. And guess what? They have a streaming service that you can buy directly, circumvent the cable company. And there's a mass exodus going on right now.
Well, it used to be if you owned the means of distribution, you owned the customer, right? And so you had to convince, if you had an idea for a TV show, you had to convince a studio to pick you up, and then you had to convince a distributor, ABC, NBC, whatever, to carry your show. And so at that point, the points of distribution had ultimate power. That's no longer the case. And this is true of like movie studios too, where the movie studios all kinds of different companies would produce the movies, but you had to get a studio to sign you up. Otherwise you didn't get in theaters. So the companies that controlled access to the customers, that controlled distribution, had all the power. The internet's blown that model completely to the wind, and which is why you see like Netflix is now a movie studio, right? They come up with their own series, they come up with their own movies. Same with Amazon, same with Apple. I think most of the movies I watch now are originated from the content providers, not from the distribution platforms. So that's the real major shift. Anyone that's kind of made their chops off of owning distribution channel and they had all control of who got access to the customers, that whole model has collapsed. And I think we're seeing the death throes of that.
You're right. The model is has changed too. There's an announcement out of YouTube this week where the CEO of YouTube said that there's more people watching YouTube now on their TVs than on their mobile devices. And I remember getting my first smart TV and seeing YouTube on there and being like, why would I want to watch YouTube on my TV? Now, I watch very little live TV. I don't have a traditional cable service. And, I have the Google TV, so it puts all the recommendations on the main screen or whatever. And yeah, I mean, more than half of what I watch is YouTube videos. And it's not just, the traditional videos. It could be, documentaries. It could be live TV or on demand versions of live streams, and it could be podcasts, right? We're on YouTube, so now you can watch us on your TV if you want to see my face that big. Even Netflix is getting into the podcast, or they're considering, supposedly, according to Business Insider, getting into the podcast business because this, as you say, the traditional sources of news and information are becoming democratized, decentralized, right? You have people that are creating, original creators that are driving programming, have video podcasts, and all of those things, and people are watching them, on their TV. So it's even gotten Netflix attention.
2 nights ago, my oldest daughter is taking advanced placement in European history, and they're covering World War I, and she saw part of the movie 1917, which is an excellent movie about World War I. And she said, well, can we watch that here? We hop over to Apple TV. They wanted like $4 to rent it. Instead, I, as you say, I popped to the YouTube app on the TV, and then I started pulling up older All's Quiet on the Western Front, some other World War I movies. I don't recall. I cannot think of the last time I watched a broadcast TV show, period. It's been years. Even cable TV. I have cable because that's how I get internet in my house. I don't know the last time I watched a cable television program. So distribution is dying now that distribution is ubiquitous. And now it's who provides the content, who can personalize the content, and who can get me what I want when I want it. As soon as YouTube saw me looking up World War I movies, it presented me with 12 other options that I could watch on YouTube. So that sort of capability, which was sort of innovated with Netflix, but everybody's providing it now. Broadcast TV says, here's the program. You show up when I tell you to. All these other platforms are saying, let me know what you want, and I'll deliver it to you.
Yeah, and the reality is viewership has been declining. That's why those Super Bowl numbers are so big. I remember listening to a marketing podcast last year after the Super Bowl, and them saying, I think it was Gary Vaynerchuk or something, that was saying, hey, the Super Bowl is the best buy around, which people kind of laughed at because, of the extraordinary prices to purchase a 30-second Super Bowl ad. But he said it's the only event of its kind in America, at least, maybe in the world, where everybody in the country is watching at the same time. That just doesn't happen that way in our society. To your point, other than a football game, which a sporting event, which we talked a little bit about being on different platforms now, I don't think I watch any live events. Probably the Super Bowl, other sporting events, and I think the Thanksgiving Day parade. Those are the live events that I watch, right? So, you have this decline in viewership that's been going on for 2 decades. The streaming, better access to the streaming platforms, as you say, ease of use. And when major events, which are the only reason why you're watching broadcast TV, are now streaming, in some cases, they're prioritizing the streaming. I mean, the Super Bowl, yes. The Olympics, this past Olympics. I mean, I don't know if you watched the Olympics. I remember as a kid watching the Olympics. Yeah, everybody got together. You avoided looking at the news if it was abroad, right? Everybody sat down for prime time and you watched what they showed you. I think it was NBC still. You watched what they showed you. It was from 8 to 11. And if you wanted to stay up for the late night after the news, you stayed up for the late night, but you watched what they told you to watch. This past Olympics, they had everything streaming. Nobody watched the prime broadcast was way down, viewership was.
you bring up an excellent point too. My first book, I called it contextification. Context matters. Watching a game-winning touchdown live as it happens is totally different than watching a replay the next day or even an hour later, right? So some events are worth setting aside the time to watch it, but I wonder what percentage of those people that had access from the app weren't plopped down in front of a television to watch it. They were out mountain biking, or they were driving to grandma's house and they had it playing in the background on an iPad in their car, right? The moving to streaming away from broadcast allows you to participate in these time-sensitive, context-sensitive events while you're still living your life the way you might otherwise want to do so. So, the notion of let's have a Super Bowl party, let's all get together for that, I'm sure that's still very big, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a proportion of customer or people that watch the Super Bowl who were out hiking or they were out shopping and they were doing something else. And because of streaming, they were allowed to participate in the event while they did other things in their life at the same time. That's totally new.
It's new, and I think it's becoming, like you say, I think you're alluding, it's becoming the standard, right? I think I transition, and part of it's life, but I guess it's part of, happens with everybody, right? Our lives have changed, right? My daughter's got into competition cheer this past year. So I spent every Sunday afternoon at cheer competition during football season, right? And you look around that competition, and no, not to be sexist, but most of the audience, you look at the women in the audience and they're watching the cheer competition, and you look at the guys in the audience, and aside from when my daughter was on, for the other 4 hours of the competition that I was at, everyone's on their phones, and you can see the guy next to me, he's watching one game. The guy on the other side of me is watching another game. That's just how we consume it now. That's just the way it is. So the ad revenue of the traditional and that's what's, I think, accelerating this now, is that paradigm is shift, and the declining ad revenue from the broadcast networks has caused them to go into kind of budget cutting, reduced programming mode, which is just, expediting the whole thing.
All right. Well, since you brought it up, I'm going to segue. My daughter actually is in the Nationals cheerleading competition this weekend. And
oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And her team won first last year. She's very proud of that. I'm very proud of her too. But I did the ability to participate in these context sensitive, timing sensitive sort of events while you do other things, as you say, is the habituated norm of most people now. And if your business model doesn't adapt to that, you're gonna die quick and quiet. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing. And as you lose that audience reach, that control over who has access to the audience, you lose significant influence and power. And I think we're seeing that too. If you look at any of the major news people from like 10 years ago that have gone independent and they have their own podcasts now, like CNN lost a lot of people, Fox lost a lot of people. All of those people's podcasts now have 10 to 20 times the audience of the TV programs that they left. That's staggering. And it's led to a significant shift in the power and influence of both the old broadcast channels and those influencers that have gone independent and have succeeded.
Well, and this is where we get to kind of the the business ramifications, business impact of all of this stuff, right? I mean, so for one thing, if you're a marketer, if you're an advertiser, it's in one sense more complicated because you got to be in a lot more different, a lot of different places, a lot more channels. You can't just do the easy thing and spend $20 million or whatever the heck it is on a Super Bowl ad. But it gives you some opportunity, right? It gives you the opportunity to reach segments and personas, right? The benefit of what you talk about is that, if you're not in a mainstream channel, and you like, I think Tucker Carlson was doing it, for example, right? Kind of controversial media guy, right? If you like what he's doing and you know that you're advertising to a group of people that, you're interested in selling to that segment, that you got that segment, right? You don't have to, waste money advertising or marketing to a more mainstream generic channel. You can really focus on that buying persona, right? So that there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity in the fact that we talked about the gig economy on a previous show. I mean, you could create a one-man media company now, right? You don't need a studio. You got some lights, you got some backdrops, you got an internet connection, and you got platforms, like YouTube and LinkedIn, right? You could create a one-man media company, and you don't have the overhead and costs and some of the challenges that the big guys do. So this is what's kind of, I think that's actually what started eroding the traditional broadcast, at least the broadcast news business, right? It was all of a sudden people getting their news from, it's more democratized from a million different sources instead of just putting on the 5 o'clock news.
If you have the ability to hyper focus your marketing spend, then you have a requirement to hyper focus your marketing spend. To your example, and I would go back to Disney. The ideal Disney Plus customer is someone who pays the 20, 25, whatever dollars a month it is on the regular, but they only watch 2 or 3 hours a month, as opposed to someone who watches 100 hours a month. Because again, I got to pay the content producers and the director and the actors and so forth for every minute of watch time. So you can optimize who you keep, who you reach out to, who you market to. Another great example, and again, like or hate her or whatever, but Candace Owens, who became a figure with was it Daily Wire or something. She went independent. And just in the last few weeks, I don't normally follow this kind of stuff, but Blake Lively has some lawsuit against some other director in Hollywood, and it's $400 million lawsuit and all this other kind of stuff. And here this podcaster figures out that the New York Times was like in on some scam to get the other person in trouble. And now they've totally changed the lawsuit, and there's a counter lawsuit for another $500 million. I mean, it's just someone who things that maybe a broadcast platform wouldn't want to get into because it might be political or whatever. Some podcasters are going to dig into it. And where, investigative reporting used to be very focused and you can only say certain things, anybody that has any gumption to pursue a story and can come up with the facts can blow a story out of the water. And then, oh, by the way, double or triple their audience overnight.
Well, I was going to say, you're actually better off. I mean, that brings
Yeah.
up the challenge side of things, which is another topic we've talked about. But, when the media is even more driven by clicks that, in a social media world, then it actually rewards, some of that more controversial, shock jock kind of stuff. Right.
The reason it caught my attention is that members of her audience, as the story unfolded, and there was reporting in the New York Times like last year about Blake Lively having this problem, members of Candace's audience discovered that in the photos provided to the New York Times, there were metadata timestamps that preceded the article by like 3 months. And so it showed that the New York Times had actually been working on this story for 3 months prior to even a lawsuit being announced. So it was literally like a layout. And it was a member of the audience that pointed out the metadata, and that has now subsequently led to a change in the lawsuit itself. You're going to see more and more of this sort of thing where, and think about the audience participation aspect there. Now I'm totally psyched. Like, you sucked me in. My next door neighbor helped make participate in this gigantic story change. And it's dragging huge amount of customer attention, audience attention, and interaction. She's kind of been making this whole platform of being a sleuth, being an investigative reporter, and helping her along with it. And she's growing her audience enormously. And this is an article that mainstream media largely wouldn't touch if it wasn't for these sort of podcast channels.
Yeah, because it used to be that you would lose an advertiser, over a story that wasn't good. But that now you could argue, she could probably get away with, a 12th of the advertisers, maybe 100th of the advertisers that, big media, CNN or whatever would need to sustain themselves. And you create more of a niche offering, attract companies that, are really interested in that segment that maybe wouldn't have advertised if they were in a more mainstream segment. So yeah, I think you're going to see more and more of that.
And smartly, she makes like this mini series. Like, she'll come up with some new content every 2 days, and she just drags more and more and more eyeball minutes, which is how she makes her money. So it's a brilliant approach. And then all you need to do is find some controversial story and cover it, and all of a sudden you have an instant audience.
Well, and that's the other thing that's changed, right? I mean, I remember, I forget what year it was, but there was one year where the wife forced me to watch one of these award shows that I never watch. But it was the year where you saw the shift happen from all of the movies that were getting awards were not from major movie networks. Although I guess you could argue now Netflix is a major movie network now, but at the time they weren't, right? It was like the Netflix year where every award-winning movie or show was on Netflix, and you saw the caliber of the actors, the quality of the content, which of course created more of that, where actors that said they would never do TV were all of a sudden in these, mini series shows on streaming. So that changes. The quality of the content has gotten better, where, I've seen YouTube series that are as good or better quality than what you're seeing on, regular TV.
Yeah. Another one that comes to mind, like Piers Morgan, who got thrown off of however many different network channels because he dared to be controversial. He's doing all kinds of crazy stuff now, and drags with him a very, very dedicated audience, and drags with them very, very high paying people looking to advertise. So the ability to optimize that spend, you may spend 10 times as much per eyeball minute, but it's effective and it's measurably effective. So, further optimization. And so I don't really know how the platforms can respond. People like Disney who own content can do so, which is what we're starting to see. But the people that are just in the distribution channel, their time is limited, I think.
So what do you think, as far as the time frame here, right? Is this going to be a slow decline? Think of radio, where it's like, okay, there's still people listening to the radio. There's still some traditional radio. Although every time I turn on the FM radio after having satellite radio, I'm like, oh my God, a commercial? What is this? But do you think it's a slow, gradual, continued decline? Or do you think there's going to be some immediate collapse moment with this? Because like a lot of the AI stuff we talk about, on one hand it's the next evolution, but on the other hand it's just accelerating at a rate I don't think we've seen before.
It was either Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, or I forget the other famous writer. They were who had really major up and downs financially throughout their lifetime, and they asked him, how did you become bankrupt? And his response was two ways: slowly at first, and then all of a sudden. And so I see that's what's going to happen with the broadcasters. I mean, CNN just laid off like a third of their workforce or something like that. We've been watching the slowly at first part of that, and now I think we're hitting the all of a sudden. And I would say potentially between COVID and this most recent election and so forth, we're at that threshold point. So I think Wile E. Coyote finally jumped over the side of the canyon, and he's paused for a second, and now starts to fall until he smacks down at the canyon floor. I think it's going to be pretty quick, within the next 18 months, that they're going to be largely irrelevant to an extent.
Interesting. Chris, great topic, great conversation as always, and thanks for joining us, everybody. We're off next week actually, but we'll be back Wednesday, February 26th, and then back to weekly every week at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. In the meantime, if there's anything you're working on, you want some help, or you want a customized industry briefing workshop, go to irpaai.com/analyst. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.
Take care, everyone.